Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions came out on September 7, 2010, and it's nearly been 12 years since then. A good majority of the users and critics have the same feeling about the game that I have. It is not terrible, far from that in fact, but the game, it's not spectacular or amazing, it's just a fine Spider-Man game. But Shattered Dimensions is different from its previous predecessors, in that its story creates some of the best Spider-Man stories ever told, with those being Dan Slott's run Spider-Man, where he brought multiple versions of Spider-Man into the same universe, which he wasn't the first to do, but they also created the best Spider-Man movies with Across the Spider-Verse and No Way Home. I know this game didn't give the exact idea for the whole Spider-Verse thing. In fact, the 90s Spider-Man TV show did that first. And speaking of which, you should go watch my video on that. But anyway, let's jump into Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, the original Spider-Verse. Shattered Dimensions is very different from its predecessors, and I'm all for these changes. The major change of the game is that its main villain isn't Venom for the first time in 4 games, and it's actually not an open world game at that. This game is completely level based, and I'm all for that. The game starts off with Mysterio stealing a mystical tablet from some museum, and the Amazing Spider-Man comes to stop him. While Mysterio is defeated, Spider-Man accidentally punches the tablet and the tablet breaks into multiple parts and Mysterio escapes. Madam Web appears and tells you this tablet isn't the ordinary one, but it's a tablet of time. Since the tablet has been broken into multiple fragments, the multiple dimensions it has split into are starting to break apart, and it's up to you and their 3 other Spider-Men to retrieve the fragments from Madam Web and put the tablet back together. The 4 Spider-Men of the game are the Amazing Spider-Man, Ultimate Spider-Man, Spider-Man Noir, and Spider-Man 2099. Each Spider-Man has to defeat 3 villains each, and then they get to fight Mysterio, who has actual powers in this game, not just, the usual projectors and illusions. Starting off with the worst of the 4, Amazing Spider-Man. Amazing is voiced by Neil Patrick Harris, who voiced Spider-Man in Spider-Man the New Animated Series, which I think is a pretty good show. His 3 villains, though, are terrible. First, we have Kraven the Hunter, and in this game, he just looks and sounds like an idiot to me. Next is Sandman, a villain I just don't really like in general, and the Juggernaut, which to me seems like a cop-out because he's an X-Men villain. Overall, the game's art style looks really good, but in this dimension, this art style doesn't really appeal to me because it looks like a 60s comic book art style, which I don't really like. Plus, all the Spider-Man is at least fun to control because the 3 have special abilities, like Ultimates, he has a Rage mode, and 2099 can slow down time, while this Spider-Man has none of that. The third best Spider-Man is 2099, who is voiced by Dan Gilvezan, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, who voiced Spider-Man in Spider-Man and his Amazing Friends back in the 80s. And he doesn't do all that good of a job voicing Miguel O'Hara to me, and I wouldn't really picture his voice being for 2099, maybe for Noir because he kind of talks like an old-timey dude, if that makes any sense. 2099 does have some cool villains, and they're actually some of the only ones that made me frustrated throughout the entire game because I had to complete these on hard difficulty for the level challenges, especially when it came to Doc Ock. Every level/boss in the game has their own challenges you need to complete to obtain the 100% rating on the game and the Platinum Trophy that I did earn. The 3 challenges are Best Combo Rating, Best Collection, and Best Clear Time, and if you do all these for the Platinum medals in the game, you obtain the Platinum. Anyway, the other 2 villains are Hobgoblin and Scorpion. All 3 villains were made for the game. Noir is the second best Spider-Man, and this whole Spider-Man's deal is stealth. There are a couple of times where you fight enemies straight up, like the others, but most of the time you stick to the shadows because once you get caught, you basically insta-die. The game's stealth missions definitely take inspiration from the Arkham games that came out prior. He's also voiced by Christopher Daniel Barnes, who voiced Spider-Man in the animated series from the 90s. Plus, Noir's villains are really good and fit the whole aesthetic perfectly with Hammerhead, which he already looks like he's from the 30s, and he plays the whole gangster role perfectly. Vulture is pretty good, and his design looks really creepy to me because he gives me some Gollum vibes. And then there's the Green Goblin, which has a very bad design for me because he just looks like Shrek with waves. My favorite of the 4 is Ultimate Spider-Man because he's voiced by Josh Keaton, who voices Spider-Man in The Spectacular Spider-Man. And this Spider-Man also has the best villains and best quips/one-liners.
See what I can do now?
I am so impressed. I've never seen anyone start a truck before.
Laugh it up, loser.
Plus, he has the black suit, which if you haven't watched my previous Spider-Man videos, I love every time the black suit makes an appearance. And the reason it makes an appearance in this game is that this Spider-Man is the weakest of the 4 because he's the youngest of the 4. But the real reason he actually has the black suit is to distinguish him from the Amazing Spider-Man because they would both just have the same, red and blue suits. Ultimate's villains are awesome. The Electro level was really funny, and he even calls you a schmuck.
If it isn't the spectacular spider smut!
Deadpool makes an appearance as well, and I know I probably sound hypocritical by saying earlier that Juggernaut isn't a Spider-Man villain, but fuck that. Deadpool is great in this game, he's funny, and he's voiced by Nolan North, which was probably a test run for his own game that came out a couple years later. And the final villain is Carnage, which I was surprised to see, but it was probably my favorite level out of the 13. All 4 Spider-Man both take their own turn, weakening them. First, Noir has to get through a ripoff of the Scarecrow missions from Arkham Asylum, then it's Ultimate's turn, which was really fun and hard at the same time, because you have to fight every villain from before, but they're also scaled down. Then it's 2099's turn, where you skydive through debris, which wasn't really all that fun, and the whole skydive thing does take place in the previous 3 missions. Then it's Amazing's turn to lay down the final blow and shrink him down to his normal weak self, where every Spider-Man takes their own turns beating him. Madam Web sends all the Spider-Men back to their own dimensions, and while they're swinging around, they have a moment that I really like.
You guys were all right, but you have to admit,
With 4 different Spider-Men?
the one thing I know for sure,
Out of all of them,
I'm the best.
Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions overall is a really fun game, where there really isn't a story, which does suck, but it's fun to just turn off your brain and run around and fight enemies. Every boss battle in the game has 2 different fights with different versions of themselves. Their base version and their overpowered version once they get the fragment. They did something similar to this in Web of Shadows, where you would fight the base version of a boss, then their symbiote version. This game also does have sort of a leveling system where you can upgrade your combat moves and get upgrades for each individual Spider-Man, and to unlock these upgrades you need to fully complete the 180 challenges that this game has. Also, you can get alternate suits for each Spider-Man, unlike Web of Shadows. Both this game and Web of Shadows do have great combat systems, so I'll give it a tie in those aspects. After taking me about a month to complete this game, not because it was hard or boring, although I did have times where I really didn't want to play this game, is because there is no story. Even though there is a really bad story, I will give this game a 7.5, because the combat is really good, the art style overall is beautiful, and the main reason is the villains are awesome. Plus, they actually brought back people who have voiced Spider-Man and actually know the character, unlike the guy in Web of Shadows. I would recommend for anyone who wants to play some of the old Spider-Man games to play this one over Web of Shadows for sure. Not only is this game cheaper to find, but it's way more fun and it never lags, and collecting the emblems in the game actually has a reward rather than just health. So yeah, this game is better than Shadows, but is it the best out of the 3 PS3/Xbox 360 games that came out? We'll have to see when I come back to Edge of Time, which is a sequel to this game. So stay tuned for that, and hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. Please like and subscribe.